لا يفرج كربا بات يضنينا ويزرع الورد فينا والرياحينا وينشر الهدي إيمانا وموعظة فبالجهالة قد خابت مساعينا من لا يفرج.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أهلا وسهلا ومرحبا بكم. Welcome to another edition of Friday Night Live with myself, Sulaiman Ravat. Alhamdulillah, thumma alhamdulillah, it's now the fourth edition of Friday Night Live. It's amazing how quickly time passes us by. But as I mentioned last week, and I will mention every week, as a reminder to myself and as a reminder to one and all out there, the most important thing is that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala must accept. In the court of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, it's not about what you did, or how much you did, or how often you did, or how well received what you did was. It's about whether it is accepted by Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala or not. So from the onset, we ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to grant us ikhlas and sincerity, to make us say what we say for the benefit of the speaker as well as the listener, to bring us back to the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to bring us closer to the deen of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, the deen of Islam, the perfect deen with regards to which Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala himself has proclaimed, Al-Yawma akmaltu lakum deenakum wa atmamtu alaykum ni'mati wa raditu lakum al-Islam deena. And I hope that this introduction to the program would also remind me and remind you that every time when we do something, when we commence with something, we must check our niyyah. In the midst of that program, in the middle of that program, in the middle of that initiative, we must check our niyyah. And also at the end, because completing a good deed, that does not guarantee you the reward in the year after. Because Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala says, Man ja'a bil hasanati falahu ashru amthaliha. That person who comes with the good deed intact on the day of Qiyamah, then minimum we multiply the reward by 10, and maximum there is no limit depending on the person's sincerity, devotion, commitment, etc. So even after we have completed the deed, be it Hajj, be it fasting, be it Salah, we need to ensure that we preserve that deed. We do not corrupt it by allowing pride and arrogance to creep in. We do not corrupt it by becoming conceited or becoming proud and arrogant. So may Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala grant us the ability and the understanding in this regard. For those who may have viewed and watched the first 3 editions of Friday Night Live, you would have noticed that we have a mixture of Islamiyat and current affairs discussions on the program. Following the same format this evening, inshallah, we'll commence with our Tafseer discussion up front. We're going to be talking about fortune telling and those who read palms and those who go to people and expect those people to predict the future, or expect those people to tell them matters of the unseen, who's out to harm them and who's out to get them, based on a Quranic verse of Surah Ma'idah. After that, we'll take a look at our current affairs issue for the week. We'll then move on to our story and our anecdote for the week. Then our nikah segment, where we give some advice for those who are about to get married, for those who are married, for those who may be married for many years. But as I always say every week, there's definitely room for improvement. And we conclude with our Sunnah discussion for the week, something practical that we can implement up to the next program, inshallah. May Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala make it beneficial, may Allah make it motivational, may Allah make it inspirational, and may Allah make it beneficial for us in this dunya as well as in the year after. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. Welcome back to Friday Night Live. We now move on to our Tafseer segment. And this week we're going to discuss just one phrase from the 3rd verse of Surah Al-Ma'idah. And we're going to base our entire discussion just on one phrase that alone should tell us volumes about the depth of the meaning of the verses and the sentences and the phrases of the Quran Kareem. And nothing can match it, nothing can surpass it, simply because this is Tanzeelum min Rabbil Alameen. This is the word of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. It comes from a perfect being. No orator, no scholar, no debater can match the words of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. No poet can match the words of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Now in this verse, verse number 3 of Surah Al-Ma'idah, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala commences by discussing the categories of meat which is not permissible for consumption, the different types of meat which you cannot eat. And at the end, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala mentions, not at the end of the verse, but at the end of the discussion pertaining to those categories of meat or animals which die in different circumstances which are not permissible for consumption by Muslims, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala mentions, وَأَن تَسْتَقْسِمُوا بِالْأَزْلَامِ, and that you distribute by arrows, and that you distribute by arrows. Now, the scholars write that there are two interpretations here. The one is in sync with what is being discussed prior to this phrase, وَأَن تَسْتَقْسِمُوا بِالْأَزْلَامِ, that you distribute by arrows, meaning that the ulama write, in the time of Jahiliyyah, in the period of ignorance, what used to happen is, for example, they would purchase a camel. The mushrikeen, the polytheists, they would purchase a camel, and there would be 10 purchases. 10 people in partnership would purchase the camel. But they would take 7 arrows, and or rather they would take 10 arrows, write the name of each partner on one arrow, and the 10 arrows would then have the 10 different names, and then they pull only 7 arrows out. So they shake the arrows, perhaps put it in some sort of a container, and pull out only 7 from the 10. And the 7 that are pulled out, those 7 will get a share in the camel, and the remaining 3 would be deprived. So 10 of them pay for the animal, but only 7 of them benefit. And what would happen is that those 7, instead of getting 1/10 of the animal, which was their rightful share, they're getting more, because 3 are being deprived. And the 3, they get nothing whatsoever. So that is tantamount to gambling. Gambling, sometimes you get more than what you deserve, and sometimes you get less than what you deserve, at times absolutely nothing. So Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala speaks about that and says it's prohibited. How is it that 10 people are buying and then you're distributing by arrows? That the 7 whose arrows are drawn, they get a share. The other 3 that they paid, although they paid, they don't get a share. That is haram. The next phrase, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala mentions, ذَلِكُمْ فِسْقٍ, that all of these things that have been mentioned, the different categories of animals that are not permissible for consumption, and this aspect, وَأَن تَسْتَقْسِمُوا بِالْأَزْلَامِ, the distribution of arrows. So that's the one interpretation, that they used to distribute shares in an animal that was slaughtered as per the names on arrows, depriving some and giving more to others. Then some ulama say that there's a slightly different interpretation here, which is also correct. And what's that interpretation? The ulama explain that they would go to the Kaaba, for example, and they would write on 3 arrows. The first arrow they would write that my Rabb, my Allah, my sustainer, my nourisher, He commands me. On the second arrow they would write, my Rabb prohibits me. And on the third arrow they would keep it blank. So they got 3 arrows and they shake it a bit. If they pull the one that says my Rabb commands me, then they'll go ahead and do the action that they were contemplating doing. If they pull the arrow that says my Rabb forbids me, then they leave out that action. And if they pull the blank arrow, then they redo the process until they pull either the arrow that says my Rabb commands me or the one that says my Rabb forbids me. So we make istikhara, we make mashwara, beautiful teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They used to work with these arrows. Or sometimes they would try and work out the genealogy of a person. There was no DNA in those times. If a woman was immoral and she was intimate with more than one man, and now it's not clear whose child it is, they would write the names of all the potential fathers, the probable fathers, on these arrows. And the arrow that they pull, they'll say, right, this man will be the father to this particular child. At times they would, they would want to make some decision. They would want to know matters of the unseen. They would keep these arrows by the idols and they would pull it all out. So the ulama write that all of this is haram, and Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is referring to these practices when Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala says, وَأَن تَسْتَقْسِمُوا بِالْأَزْلَامِ, that you distribute by arrows. Now this brings us to a very important and a very pertinent discussion, and that is the discussion with regards visiting fortune tellers, palm readers, those who tell you or claim to be able to tell you to know matters of the unseen. Or to predict the future, to tell you whether your business venture will be successful or not, whether this particular person will be a good spouse for you or not, whether indeed it is your mother-in-law who is after your blood, or it is your daughter-in-law who's defaming you and running you down in your absence. Now, this unfortunately has become a practice, not amongst just ordinary Muslims, but even at times good Muslims. Women in hijab would be frequenting the premises of such people. This has become a very common thing. You open up community newspapers these days and you'll find these people placing their adverts there. And the argument is if it wasn't a lucrative business, they wouldn't be advertising so widely. Many times you'd hear these people saying that Muslim women frequent our premises. They come to us and they say, I suspect my husband of having an affair. Tell me, who's he having an affair with? They come and they say, you know what, I'm about to open a business. Tell me, will it be profitable or not? Tell me, is my mother-in-law plotting and scheming against me? You going to a fortune teller, trying to predict the future or trying to obtain information with regards to the unseen, this is a great sin in Islam. It's a great transgression. Let me take you through a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in this regard. Hafsa radiyallahu anha reports that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, 40 days of salah will not be accepted from the person who asks a fortune teller concerning something. If you go to such a person, 40 days of your salah, 40 days of salah, each day you're performing 5 salawat, 40 days not accepted. Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anh reports that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said that there are 3 categories of people who have exonerated themselves from that which was revealed to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The first is that person who believes the predictions of a fortune teller. The second, that person who becomes intimate with his wife while she's menstruating. And the third, that person who gratifies himself from the rear of his spouse. So here we see, you go to a fortune teller, you go to those who claim to be able to predict the future. This is contrary to your own belief. Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, إِنَّ اللَّهَ عِنْدَهُ عِلْمُ السَّاعَةِ وَيُنَزِّلُ الْغَيْثِ وَيَعْلَمُ مَا فِي الْأَرْحَامِ وَمَا تَدْرِي نَفْسٌ مَاذَا تَكْسِبُ غَدًا وَمَا تَدْرِي نَفْسٌ بِأَيِّ أَرْضٍ تَمُوتُ. It is Allah alone who has knowledge of Qiyamah. It is Allah alone who knows when exactly it's going to rain and how much it's going to rain. It is Allah alone who knows whether you'll have a male offspring or female offspring, what the mother is carrying in the womb. Even with the tests, sometimes they fail. And it is Allah alone who knows what you will earn tomorrow. And it is Allah alone who knows when you will die, how you will die, and where will you die. So we need to work on our iman. We need to work on our iman and strengthen our iman and turn to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala for solutions. These people are nothing short of quacks. They're there to make money out of you. If they could predict the future, then they would be millionaires and billionaires. There would be no need for them to charge you. If they knew the unseen, then they would be able to solve many a mystery and they would become very popular and very famous. At times, they are just very smart in the way they operate. They pick up indications from you. They play on your suspicions. They play on your assumptions. At times they work with the jinnat who are able to tell them a little here and there in terms of what's happening, and it surprises you and it makes you think that these people are good. Remember, only Allah knows the unseen and only Allah can predict the future. We should abstain and we should stay clear of visiting such people or believing in them or trying to gain any assistance from them whatsoever. May Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala grant us the understanding. Welcome back to Friday Night Live with myself, Sulaiman Rawat. We move on to our current affairs segment of the program. And in this particular segment, in this particular slot, we take a look at one of the issues that dominated headlines for the week, or something very interesting that came about during the course of the week. And we reflect over that particular issue and try and look at it from an Islamic perspective as well. I came across a very interesting report during the course of the week, and that report suggests, and I'm just giving you the conclusion of that report, it says that the most divisive factor in South Africa is no longer race. It's not race that is dividing people, that you're black and I'm white and you're colored and that person's Indian. No, that remains a factor which divides people, but the most divisive factor has become economic inequality. The fact that people are not on the same level economically speaking, financially speaking. Now, from an Islamic perspective, we know that there can never be a situation when everyone is on the same platform or everyone is on the same level from a wealth perspective, from an economic perspective, because Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala has created the dunya such that Allah makes some in need of others. Or rather, Allah makes us interdependent. Allah grants more wealth to some so that they become dependent on the labor of others. And Allah grants less wealth to others so that they become dependent on the wealth of those by whom they are employed. If everyone was equally wealthy, no one would want to work for the next person. and the system of this dunya, the system of this world would not run. So Allah grants to some more and He grants to some less, so that they become interdependent. This is mentioned in the Quran Kareem. And Allah Ta'ala says that if we had to grant everyone whatever they wanted to the extent that they wanted, then there would have been chaos on earth, because there would be no interdependence. And if there were no interdependence, there would be no system. So this is also a great wonder and a great sign of the greatness of Allah Ta'ala in how Allah Ta'ala has created the system of the world. But the system of the world does not mean that there must be a huge gap and there must be a huge divide between the haves and the have-nots. Yes, you will get those people who, for example, are worthy of receiving zakah. That's why we have the concept of zakah. Those who are liable for zakah must give their zakah and their compulsory charity to those who are recipients. But when you have a situation where the economy is skewed, where the bulk of the wealth is in the hands of a very elite few, and the majority are deprived of opportunities, the majority are deprived of enjoying even basic amenities and basic necessities, then it leads to many consequences. And this is one of the fundamental issues that we are grappling with here in South Africa. Whilst there may have been transformation, and there might have been change from a political perspective, that those who were once totally left out politically, they now have political control. But those who were previously disadvantaged economically and financially, they remain disadvantaged economically and financially, even though it is 18 years after democracy. And this has become a very divisive factor. It has become a factor which is dividing South Africans. Because those who don't have, and those who are seeing others enjoy opportunities, others enjoy better service delivery, others enjoy better facilities, others enjoy better infrastructure, they're starting to ask the question that it's 18 years now since democracy. How is it that things are not changing? How is it that one particular person from a particular group can live in a palatial home, and then the majority of the populace of this country, they're still living in shacks, they're still living in informal settlements, they're still living in very basic houses, they don't have electricity, there's no water sanitation, you're still hearing about schools where people are using pits to go to toilet, there's no sewage infrastructure. For how long does this continue? And for how long does this divide remain the same? When is the gap starting to narrow? When is the gap going to start closing? And this issue came to the fore because a survey was conducted. And in the survey they said more people felt that economic inequality was dividing South Africans than those who felt that race. And we know that racism has been an issue, is an issue, and will be an issue for some time. We need to learn how to deal with it, but that's a different discussion for a different day. Now, what do we learn from all of this? What we learn from this is that when people react because they feel that I am being deprived on a continuous basis and others are enjoying life, then whilst we might not agree with their reaction, and we might not feel that their reaction is justified, however, we need to keep in mind that if the status quo remains, there are going to be problems. So we cannot live in our cocoons. We need to start digging into our own pockets. Besides the zakah, which we spend upon Muslims, because that is the ruling as far as zakah is concerned, we need to start seeing to the welfare of those who are underprivileged, or those who are less privileged. We need to play our part in terms of narrowing that divide. Because for as long as that divide remains, and for as long as there is that gap, that huge gap, that skewed economy, between the haves and the have-nots in South Africa, it's going to result in us being a divided society. It's going to result in one segment of society having animosity and hatred, feeling that they have been granted a raw deal towards others. Whether the degree of that is justified or not, or the reaction to that is justified or not, that's a separate issue. That's a different discussion altogether. But this is the reality, and it's something that we need to face up to. Whilst everyone is focusing on whether there will be e-tolling or there won't be e-tolling, whether Mdluli is guilty or is not guilty, whether Zuma will win a second term or not, whether Bheki Cele will be fired or he won't, sometimes the more substantive issues and the more critical issues are lost. The media don't focus on it too much because perhaps the owners of the media, they are that elite. They form part of that elite that have the control over the majority of the wealth and the resources of the country. And they are the reason that the economy is skewed. So they don't want for there to be too much focus on that. Now, this week I had the opportunity of interviewing a person who done research in this regard. And he told me about 4 things. He said, fundamentally, there's 4 problems. The first is this, that those at the bottom end are not getting enough opportunities. There isn't enough jobs. There isn't enough career opportunities for the younger people who are coming into the market. Then on the top also there's a problem. You get the fat cats, as they call them, the bigwigs, the CEOs and the directors and board members. They getting huge salaries and even bigger bonuses, and the people on the bottom end are really struggling, and some of that money could be utilized to employ more people. Then the third thing, there's a lack of education. Because there's a lack of education, it results in a lack of opportunity, and it results in the lack of people, the inability of people to be able to prosper. And the fourth thing he mentioned is this: there's no concept of responsibility. There is no concept of responsibility. There are policies. There are policies. For example, there's the BEE policy, affirmative action. But these policies don't work because people are not taking responsibility. They're rather looking at where can I find the loophole in this policy to make an extra buck for myself, to try and override the policy and fulfill and achieve my own interests. So each one of us have a responsibility in this regard. Each one of us might not be so affluent or so wealthy that we are able to share with others to try and narrow that divide. But whether it be politically or whether it be by activism or whether it be just by conscientizing people in this regard, we need to play our part. May Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala grant us the understanding. Welcome back to Friday Night Live with myself, Sulaiman Rawat. We now move on to our story for the week. And last week I mentioned to you 2 or 3 incidents with regards to Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, whose actual name was Nu'man bin Thabit. This week I have one more story with regards to Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, and I thought it would be very inspirational and there's a lot of lesson that we can take from it. One day Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah was walking through the streets and he heard 2 youngsters talking. And the one youngster is saying to the other, "Did you hear about that great Imam, Abu Hanifa? I heard that he doesn't sleep the whole night. The whole night he's involved in ibadah and the worship of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala." And this had a profound impact on Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah thought to himself that people have such an elevated opinion of me. They have such a high opinion of me. And here I am and I'm sleeping at night and I'm snoring away and I'm enjoying my rest. This can't be. If people think so highly of me, then I must also try and better myself. And the ulama write, from that day onwards, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah never slept at night. He never slept at night. He would perform the Fajr Salah with the same wudu with which he had performed his Isha Salah. And this was, he wanted to better himself simply because he said, it's not fair. People think so high of me and I'm not even on that position. Let me try and raise myself. He wasn't doing it for the people. He was doing it because he felt people have such high expectations of me, and how will I face my Allah? Allah will say, people thought so highly of you, yet you did not take any responsibility in that regard. Now what is our condition today? We are the total opposite. We don't do, but we want people to say we do. We're not worthy of praise, but we want people to praise us. And if they don't praise us, then we feel offended. Or if they don't praise us sufficiently, we feel offended. Or if they don't praise us to the extent that they praise the next person, we feel offended. And when they do praise us and we're not worthy of that praise, we don't feel guilty, we actually feel happy. And that's the difference between us and our pious predecessors. When somebody praised them and they were not worthy of praise, they felt guilty. And privately, without showing it to the public, they said, no man, people are expecting that from us and we are not on that level. Let us try and bring ourselves onto that particular level for the pleasure of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, not for the pleasure of any human being. Now here what we see is that we need to imbibe this within us also. There's a beautiful dua of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that, oh Allah, make me small and inferior in my own eyes, but make me great and superior in the eyes of others. In other words, oh Allah, let other people have a high opinion of me, but let me have a low opinion of myself. So that I remain humble, but people have great expectations of me. Because tilka ajilu bushra al-mu'min, or kama qala alayhi salatu wasalam. When people talk good of you, not because you want them to talk good of you, not because you desire the praise, but they talk good of you because they genuinely think good of you, then that is a glad tiding which has come to you early in this dunya already. That inshallah, because they have a good opinion of you, Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala will then treat you in a good way on the day of Qiyamah. So we must constantly make this effort. We remain humble. We remain humble. We don't do things to please people. But when people have such high expectations of us, your teacher has a high expectation of you, your parents have a high expectation of you, your spiritual mentor has a high expectation of you, then don't let people praise you when you know that praise is not justified and then you feel happy about it. Look to always better yourself and improve yourself. And this is a key thing in our lives. When it comes to money, when it comes to business, we always want to improve. When it comes to matters of this dunya, we always want that better car or the more spacious house or the more modern gadget or the more up-to-date version of whatever we desire. But when it comes to deen, then unfortunately we're very satisfied with what we have and what we are doing, even though it might not be necessary, even though it might not be to the adequate level. So we make dua to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, that Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala grants us the tawfiq of wanting to always improve ourselves, especially from a spiritual perspective. Welcome back to Friday Night Live with myself, Sulaiman Rawat. We now move on to our marriage segment of the program. And this is where we give a marital tip for the week. As I say, and I will continue to say, so that we remind ourselves every week, there is always room for improvement in your marriage. And your marriage is one of the most important relationships that you can ever have. A relationship that will continue into Jannah, inshallah. A relationship that will secure your reward for every second that you are in that relationship. And the longer you remain married, the longer you continue to secure perpetual reward. May Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala grant us barakah in our marriages. May Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala grant us bliss and happiness in our marriages. But there's always room for improvement. No matter how happy you may think you are, look at how you can improve it even further. Whatever gremlins there are, whatever small problems, niggling problems there are, let's see how we can overcome them. Let's see how we can, we can improve on them. Now, I've shared with you, I think it's 3 tips already. We spoke on the first week about nikah being an ibadah, and we should take it seriously. The second week, we spoke about nikah having the potential to get us reward for every second that we are in that nikah, even though we might be married for 40 and 50 and 60 years, providing our intention is correct and we continuously renew our intention, and that we live our lives and our marital lives in accordance to the dictates of the Sharia. And then last week, obviously, we spoke about the importance of education in marriage. We spoke about learning about marriage prior to marriage, teaching your children about marriage, the theory part of it, and also the practical aspects, basic qualities that are required for a successful life and also for a successful marriage. Because when you just walk into marriage without the theoretical knowledge and also without practical tools, then you don't have the skills to be a good person. How then are you going to become a good husband, or you're going to become a good wife? Now we take the discussion forward this week, and I want to emphasize on the aspect of taqwa. When the nikah ceremony is taking place, when the nikah is being solemnized, then the khutbah masnoona is recited. And if we look at the khutbah masnoona, we will say there is no ayah there pertaining to nikah. All the ayat that are recited in the khutbah masnoona, the khutbah that was recited by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam when he would solemnize nikahs, we would find all the ayat have to do with taqwa. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا. Now what do we learn from here? Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala is saying taqwa is important in every aspect of your life. In your educational life, in your financial life, in your social life, in your relationship with your parents, in your relationship with your siblings, in your relationship with your offspring, in your relationship with your community, in your relationship with relatives, in your relationship with friends. But it is more emphasized in marriage. The reason being, marriage is the most intimate of relationships. So what happens in the bedroom is known only to husband, wife and Allah. What happens in the marital home most of the time is known only to husband, wife and Allah. There's no one to police you as a husband. Are you abusing your wife? There's no one to police you as a wife. Are you not fulfilling the rights of your husband? Here and there people might observe, here and there people might get to know, but this is one of those relationships where most of the time it's known just to the two parties. So Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is reminding the two parties, it's known to you, but it's known to Allah as well. And O husband, on the day of Qiyamah, you will have to stand before Allah, and Allah will say to you, you took this woman into your marriage by taking my name. She became legal for you because you took my name in my house. She was in your guardianship. How did you look after her? You will have to account before Allah. And that woman, Allah will say, I granted you that husband and you had certain rights to fulfill of his. Did you fulfill those rights? Were you respectful to your husband? It's an ibadah, as I mentioned the other week. So you will have to stand before Allah and you will have to give account. So Allah is saying, be conscious of Allah, especially in your marital life. We need to be conscious of Allah in everything else, but in marriage more so. Because we are so closely related, it becomes easy for us to take one another for granted. It becomes easy for us to transgress the rights of one another. We feel, well, so if I spoke out of turn, if I raised my voice, it's my wife, man. It's my husband. So what's the big deal? No, it is a big deal. Because this is a servant of Allah. And Allah has placed certain responsibilities on your shoulder. Be it the husband or be it the wife. In as far as fulfilling the rights of your spouse. So taqwa is more emphasized in nikah. Because of the marriage being more intimate, because it's easier for us to take one another for granted. There's also a second element to this discussion, and that is, the more muttaqi you become, the more Allah conscious you become, the greater barakah there will be in your life, and the greater barakah there will be in your marriage. The scholars write, when you don't have taqwa, when you're not conscious of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, then your relationships with fellow human beings start to suffer. And the first relationship that will suffer is the relationship between you and your spouse. So taqwa is the key ingredient for a successful marriage. May Allah grant us the understanding. Welcome back to Friday Night Live with myself, Sulaiman Rawat. We now move on to our final segment for the program, and that is our Sunnah segment. Something practical which we can implement immediately. When we listen to the Sunnah for the week, we must make intention that, oh Allah, let me practice it immediately. And every week, if we bring one Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam into our lives, we will see the difference in our lives and we will see the barakah and blessings in our lives. Now, last week we spoke about the Sunnah of eating with the right hand. That Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam had instructed us, eat with the right hand and eat from that which is directly before you. And we mentioned that the Nabi of Allah had told us that the devil eats with his left hand. And when you eat with your left hand, the devil has a share in your meal. Even if you drink with the left hand, the devil has a share in your meal. Now, how is it? What's the correlation? What's the link? As Muslims, we don't question everything. We know that the Nabi of Allah would never lie. And if he told us that with you eating or drinking with your left hand, the devil has a share in it, definitely there'll be some harm when we eat with our left hand. And we know the right hand has been created for the purposes of eating, drinking, etc. The left hand has been created for other purposes which Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala has stipulated and Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has stipulated. There was once a man eating with his left hand. The Nabi of Allah told him, don't eat with your left hand. He said, no, I have to eat with my left hand. I can't eat with my right hand. And he said this out of arrogance. And because of that, his right hand became lame. It became paralyzed. So it is, some ulama say it is wajib to eat with the right hand. At times you can take assistance from the left hand, but you must be eating with the right hand. And I explained last week also, some people, they feel shy to dirty the glass, so they hold the glass with the left hand and they just give some support with their right hand towards the glass. That is incorrect. You hold the glass with your right hand. That glass will be washed and that glass will be cleansed at a later stage. Now the next sunnah that I want to discuss this week is where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, وَكُلْ مِمَّا يَلِيكَ, eat from that which is directly in front of you. So you've got a bowl, and there isn't a variety of dishes in the bowl or in the plate. If you have a variety of dishes, fair enough. Maybe you've got some, as we would say, kachumar on the side, some salad on the side, some sauce on the side. So then if you're moving your hand around in the platter, it's understood. Otherwise, eat from the food that's directly in front of you. Even if you're eating from a bowl and you're using a spoon, eat from that which is directly in front of you. Because there is a hadith wherein it is mentioned that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam had told that young sahabi that, Ya ghulam, sammillaha ta'ala wa kul bi yaminik wa kul mimma yalik. That, oh boy, oh youngster, take the name of Allah before you eat. Eat with your right hand and eat from that which is in front of you. And also the ulama explain, and there's a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam in this regard, that the barakah descends in the center. So you eat from the edges, moving towards the center. And also there is another hadith wherein it is mentioned that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam had said that we should clean the utensil. So the one is to eat from the center. The other is to clean the utensil after we eat. That's also a sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And to lick the fingers. So there are three things that I'm telling you for this week. The first is to eat from the food that's in front of you, unless you have a variety of dishes in the plate. The second is to clean the utensil. Some of us have this bad habit. We leave a little bit left over in the plate. And the third is to lick our fingers. Some people feel embarrassed. You go to a restaurant and now you lick your fingers. You didn't eat with the knife and fork, and then you eat with your fingers. And then you feel, hey, what everybody will think about me, I'm so greedy. Don't worry about what the rest of the world has got to say. Like Hanifa bin Yaman, when that morsel of food fell down, he picked it up and he cleaned it and he ate it. People said, hey, you're in the royal court here. They'll take offense. He said, what do I worry about what they think? أَتْرُكُ السُنَّةَ حَبِيبِ صلى الله عليه وسلم لِهَؤُلَاءِ الْحُمَقَى. These foolish people, must I worry about them and leave the sunnah of my beloved Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam? It can never happen. The sunnah of my Nabi comes first, because there is benefit in that for my dunya as well as for my after. And then Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam has given us some wisdoms also. The Nabi of Allah has said, clean your plate, because those few grains that are lying there, those few morsels that remain, maybe those are the grains and morsels that have the most barakah. And you need that for your spiritual nourishment. You need that for your strength. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam has also said, if a person eats from a plate and cleans it, the plate will make dua to Allah for his forgiveness. Now we sometimes will try and apply our logic and say, well, it's an inanimate object, it has no life. The inanimate and animate, that's according to our definition. Otherwise, everything has a degree of life. By our definition, it doesn't have that degree of life that we can classify it as animate. It doesn't move, it can't walk, talk, etc. But everything that exists, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala says, وَإِن مِّن شَيْءٍ إِلَّا يُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِهِ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَفْقَهُونَ تَسْبِيحَهُمْ. Everything praises Allah, everything that's in existence, but you cannot understand it. Also, there is one more hadith which Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam has said, the utensil of the person who cleans it thoroughly supplicates for him, saying, oh Allah, save him from the fire of Jahannam as he saved me from shaitan. So when you leave those few morsels left over, those few grains, that little bit, then you're leaving it for the devil. And the food doesn't want to be consumed by the devil, it wants to be consumed by a believer. So when you consume it and deprive the devil, the food feels privileged and makes dua to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala for you. May Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala grant us the understanding. That brings us to the conclusion of this edition of Friday Night Live with myself, Sulaiman Rawat. The fourth edition, once again we conclude as we commenced by asking Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, رَبَّنَا تَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ وَتُبْ عَلَيْنَا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ التَّوَّابُ الرَّحِيمُ. The great dua of Ibrahim and Ismail ala nabiyyina wa alayhim as-salatu was-salam. They did such a mega effort, such a great effort, such a spiritual effort constructing the Kaaba Sharif. But no pride, no haughtiness, no conceit. They conclude by saying, oh Allah, you accept, because our actions are not worthy of acceptance. And that is what Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala loves to see. Until next week, Friday, inshallah. Fi amanillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.